Hi everyone, I'm out at my uncle's house, and this is where we are growing our seeds for the spring. So a lot of our plants, we don't have to go through all this trouble. We can just take seeds and put them directly in the ground and they grow fine. But there are some plants that need to get going, and it's too cold to plant them in the ground right now, but it's going to be too hot if I start them in March or April when it's warm enough. So what we do is we start them indoors and they get a couple weeks old, and then we transplant them out in the garden. So we do that for cabbage, broccoli, and then we do the same thing also for tomatoes and peppers. So we've got them started here. This is our seed starting station that we built, and we built it really cheap. So this rack here, my uncle already had it. I don't know how much he paid for it, but we already had this. The lights, we were able to get these on Craigslist from a guy for $10 each, and that was with the bulbs. Now you can get them at Home Depot for $11 each without the bulbs, and the bulbs are about $3 each. We put two lights on each rack. You don't necessarily have to do that, but the more light that you have, the better. So let me talk about a couple basics here. Let me first talk about the mix that we put in here. So you can buy just seed starting mix at the store and put it in there, and that'll work fine. We wanted to save some money, so we made our own. What we did was we took peat moss, vermiculite, and worm castings, and we mixed those together, and then we filled the trays with that. So that's the soil mix that we use in here. I want to talk a little bit about the lights as well, because it does matter what color light you have. To keep things simple, if you're just wanting to start seeds, all you need to worry about is getting bulbs that are the daylight color. So go to Lowe's, and if the light looks blue to you, that's daylight, and that'll work for seed starting. If you want to get into using this system for growing plants all the way to flowering and things of that nature, you'll have to add in more lights, but more light colors is what I mean, but we're not doing any of that. So to keep it simple, all you need to worry about is just buying one of these or another type of fixture. You can use LED if you want, and then putting a daylight colored bulb in it. So whenever we started our seeds, we simply just filled the trays with the mix, and then I planted 3 seeds. I tried to do 3 seeds. Some of those seeds are really tiny, so you end up putting more in there, but I tried to do 3 per tray, and we'll come back through here another week or two, and we'll cut down the weaker of the plants. So you end up with only 1 plant per tray. And then what we'll do is we'll take this and we will plant this, we'll transplant this out in the garden here in a couple weeks whenever it's a little bit warmer. At least we will for the cabbage and the broccoli. The tomatoes, it'll be a little bit longer before those go out there. Something else I want to talk about are the trays that we use. So we did a lot of exploring, trying to find the cheapest way to grow plants inside of these little cells. And we decided that we were just going to use stuff we already had. So all of this stuff on here is stuff that I either got at a garage sale last year or came with other plants that I bought. It's all recycled materials though. Now you can buy these, actually let me correct myself, we did buy these trays here, these solid trays, because we didn't want any water leaking indoors. So we do have all of these trays sitting within these, and then these were $2 a piece, I believe. So hopefully next time we do this, we can find a better deal on these and get them a little bit cheaper. But another thing I want to mention is it matters how close the light is to the plant. So it needs to be only an inch or 2 away. And we have ours set up so that we can raise and lower the height of this on these chains, so we can adjust it to be higher or lower. And you'll need to do that every week or so. You'll have to adjust them to match the height, because if it's too far away, you can see some of these lights, or some of these plants are actually showing the effect that can happen. So whenever the light is too far away from the plant, it'll start reaching for it, and this will cause the plant to be what's called leggy, which means that it's taller than it should be, and it's not going to be able to support itself. So if you look at one of these plants here, see how much shorter it is and how it's growing directly up? That's what you want to see. If you start seeing something like that, that means that the light source is either too far away or it's the wrong direction. And with this circumstance, I don't know if there's really much we can do about it. We want to try wrapping it in aluminum foil attached to cardboard so that it'll reflect the light and it'll all come back in and concentrate the light back in. But the majority of the plants aren't going to have that problem with this setup. Something else I wanted to mention is you need to consider the size of the container that you're growing in. So ones that are this size here, this small size, once the plant gets more than a couple weeks old, 2 to 3 weeks old, it's going to be too large for this. You're going to have to transfer it into a larger container. So that's fine for us on these, because these are being transferred into the garden here in a few weeks. But if we were to grow tomatoes in here, we were going to have a lot more work, because we'd have to transplant that into a larger container. So what we did instead, we started all of our tomatoes inside of these. And let's see if I can pull this out. See what I'm talking about. So these are a much larger container, and these should be able to support the tomatoes until they get placed out in the garden out in April. That's the hope, at least. Out of all the things that can go wrong with seed starting, overwatering is probably the biggest, because it can contribute to an increase in mold and fungus and other bad stuff. So you don't want to water too much, but at the same time, seeds will not germinate if they aren't watered enough. So it's a fine balance, and what we did was we put the trays below, and right now we're just keeping the top moist, not overly wet. You want it to, it's a fine line you'll have to find for yourself, but another option we have here is we can water it from below. So come on in here, you can see what I'm talking about. We can put water down this tray, and then it'll absorb the moisture up from below, so you can make sure you're not overwatering that way as well. I've also seen a lot of people recommend using things like neem oil or diatomaceous earth to help with pests that can sometimes accumulate in this type of setup. So if you start seeing any issues with fungus gnats or anything like that, that's something you can do to help with it. Just sprinkle some diatomaceous earth across all of it, or same with neem oil. Just follow the directions on the bottle for that. So for some of these plants, you will also have to think about fertilizing once they're a little bit bigger. For our broccoli and cabbage, they're not going to be big enough to need fertilized before they go out in the garden, but the tomatoes will be. So once the tomatoes have 3 or 4 true leaves on them, that's whenever you add some fertilizer. And what we'll probably use is just some fish fertilizer. It's liquefied fish remains, essentially, that we mix with water and then sprinkle that on here. I don't know if we're going to do that while they're indoors. We'll have to see how the smell goes on that. That may be something that we only do once it's warm enough to put this out in the garage as well. But that's how we handle fertilization on these. And also the worm castings that we use should be enough of a fertilizer for them to get going as well. And in addition to the worm castings providing food for the plants, it also provides growth hormones and other beneficial things like that. That's why we used it in the mix. So I realized when I said that I used worm castings that a lot of people may have had no idea what that is, so I want to show you for a second what that means. So this is a worm bin that we've set up, and if you come over here with the camera, I can zoom in and show what we've got going on in here. So this is basically a worm farm. We grow worms in here simply because we want their poop. Worm poop is the best fertilizer you can use, because not only does it contain nutrients, but it also has growth hormones. It's how nature intended the process to work. So we just started this worm bin, but we're going to fill it all the way up with shredded paper and coffee grounds, and then we're going to throw kitchen scraps in here, and then the worms are going to eat it, and then when they poop, it turns it into plant food. So and the reason why we have several set up is because this is a system set up so that we can have more than one bin. So each one of these is its own worm bin, and then it drains down into this one here, which we can drain from this. And the stuff that comes out of there is this really nutrient-rich liquid that's called worm tea. So I just wanted to briefly touch on what worm castings are, because I realized that some people may not have known what I was talking about.